Hello, everyone. You should hopefully now have buffered our stream and should be seeing me. Welcome. You are here with us at BrisJS. Thank you very much for being patient. I had a few hiccups here setting up our stream for today, and we've managed to get there after all. So thank you very much for bearing with us. Hi to everyone on chat, and we'll take you straight in without any further ado to make up some of the time. Hey folks, hi Sean, hi Isaac. Yeah, we've got a few folks joining us now live, which is great. That way we can start to get some of your Q&A, and we really encourage everyone to submit as many questions as they can, and keep it kind of fun and entertaining to be able to get that engagement from you, hear what you're really keen to see about our talks tonight. And we definitely will be introducing our speakers soon, but I will go through our usual preamble just to talk a little bit about BrisJS and where you can find some of our info. Let me just quickly throw that up on the screen again. All good. Now, for those of you who join us regularly, yes, we do love to get that feedback of yours. So we try and herd that through the Slido page. So if you use Slido before, there's apps, there's sites, there's any which way you can join it. 222 is our number, nice and convenient. You can join in and get leave some questions in for the presenters, and then as you kind of think of them, try and drop them in. And if for some reason, for example, if you're on YouTube mobile or something like that, you can't kind of easily task switch away, don't worry. If you really need, just use the chat function on YouTube on our stream directly. I'll be able to ferry your questions over into the Slido and make sure that we've got everything collated so it gets answered. So yeah, that's great. I really would love to see some of your engagement there, and we will go through. Hopefully, oops, and it wasn't advancing for a second there. Look, we're still distributed. We are trying to make sure that we can go back to an in-person event. I was explaining to our presenters before, it's a little bit chicken and egg at the moment. We need enough speakers to be able to go and book the venue and get everything set up. And the speakers probably want us to be in person before they kind of decide to volunteer. So it's at the moment, we're just trying to muster up the all the speakers. So yeah, if you're keen, please let us know. But location specific. This is at the moment here. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this site that I'm on, where I'm presenting from today, which is the Yugara and Bundjalung people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Please do have a look at where your location actually borders on the traditional people's land, so that way you are aware of who you are sending your respects to as well. In Meetup, we've still made sure that we funnel these updates. They do come in a bit later. I apologize that we've had such a sort of rocky announcement process in this month as well. We still use Meetup just to broadcast and send out those emails as well, just to make sure that you get an update right before we go and have the event as a reminder. So we've been able to funnel that info in there today as well, as usual. But as you know, we do also have a couple of other socials and a couple of other places you can keep up to date with what's coming. And of course, we do abide by a code of conduct. So, it's harassment free for everyone. We want this to be a safe space. And that goes for online spaces such as our chat and as well as the stream itself. So please do make sure that you have a look at our code of conduct. And if you have any questions, you can always get in touch. But this is kind of what I was alluding to before. We really want to make sure that we build up a bank of presenters. So that way we can, also check in with folks and make sure that they can present locally. I'm hoping to try and arrange kind of a hybrid model as well, so that we can still take in extra speakers who might want to live stream from where they are, and you know, they might not be able to make it into Brisbane or something like that. So that way we can have a kind of a hybrid approach, and also same with the recordings. We might be able to live stream recordings. I think bandwidth and mobile internet and stuff like that ends up becoming our biggest hurdle, as we've seen in the past. But yeah, we'll see how we go in arranging it for you know, 2023 and 2024 going forward, of course. Yeah, but please submit a talk. It's also really useful to look at requesting a talk. Sometimes you've got presenters out there who are really keen to engage, but they're not exactly sure what folks out there are interested to hear about. So if you are like, hey, I really wish somebody, you know, would be able to go through and put together a bit of an intro or something on a given topic, feel free to throw that up in our BrisJS GitHub issues. You can see there's actually some links through from brisjs.org. But yeah, if you go through to BrisJS meetup issues, you can actually see something similar to this. It's a very old screenshot where you essentially can go through and post if you've got a particular question, if you're volunteering a talk. Those things will get tagged appropriately. You can see that some items get tagged with a scheduling link, talk length, and stuff like that. Just to try and organize this, we use our tags to kind of bundle things in, and then we use the milestones to prep people into a monthly presentation. That way, you can see what's coming up. If you're in doubt, or you've seen that, you know, the meetup page still needs an update, then you can always keep up to date with that live as it happens. But kind of seeing behind the curtain. But of course, we've got a couple of socials here that you can keep visiting. If you want to post us a question, or you know, you want to see what's coming up next, the most frequently updated one is Twitter. And of course, the YouTube channel that you see here. We'll be posting the public link to the YouTube event here as well, back on Twitter and on Facebook as well, just to make sure people know that it's on and going on. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, and that way you'll get alerts. Like if you've got YouTube mobile, you'll actually get a little pop-up saying, hey, we're about to start in half an hour, or we're live now. So those things are really useful if you want to jump in as well. And of course, BrisJS.org still up there. It needs a bit of work. I think we need to kind of look at revamping this one now, and you know, reflect the potentially the new world order of going back to in-person or hybrid events as well. So yeah, this one acts as a bit of a rallying point and some general information about BrisJS still. So definitely still some useful bits and pieces on there. But like the links to our past talks there are a little bit superseded by some of our past streams now on YouTube, which you can find as under the previous streams link and collections in there as well. Yeah, one of the very useful parts of the BrisJS pages are actually the job boards. So as you've seen there under the GitHub issues, we can also tag things with jobs and employment, and they will automatically appear here. So if you've got you've got a referral program, or you've got a job, you just want some colleagues, some cool people to come and work with you, that's what this is for. So this is kind of a locals and devs, helping each other out and posting some availabilities. And so, yeah, feel free to hop on here and post up a job. Send me a ping, or I'll notice when it comes in and go and tag it, and then it'll appear through here. Also very useful if you can let me know when that position's filled and closed, and we'll actually go through and just clean those up and make sure that this list stays current as well. So that's really valuable, and hopefully you find that useful. You can send it to people as well, and kind of use it as a rallying point. Tonight, for some reason the font is tiny. Did not do that. I apologize. I must have done it before I hit the present button, and it hasn't refreshed. But if you can read that tiny text, we actually have Dominic and Pranoy who are going to present low code software engineering. What is low code? And they'll take you through a bit of an exploration about how we can apply that. I think no matter what your skill level, I think it's very useful to be able to rapidly prototype up and put together these kinds of items. So we'll get a bit of a rundown from them now. So I'm gonna stop my sharing so that I can introduce our speakers. Hey, everyone.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
All right. So yeah, look, without any further preamble, I appreciate you guys stepping up to the plate this month, and thanks very much for going through all the organization hurdles. Look, take it away. The audience is yours.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kevin. Right. So my name is Dominic. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Five. And with me today is Pranoy, our developer advocate. You'll hear more from Pranoy later, so I'll leave further introductions about Pranoy until it's your turn to present. All right, let me start sharing my screen. 1 second. So make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Putting up the presentation. Here we go. Right, I think all of you should be seeing my slide deck. I think Pranoy will give me, right, there was a nod right there, that's good.
Yep.
Okay, now, some of you might be wondering what qualifies Pranoy and I to speak about low-code software engineering at an event called BrisJS. Well, it just so turns out that we are a low-code company from Brisbane. And we've been doing this I've been doing this for almost 3 years now. Pranoy joined us last year. And well, low-code is a pretty exciting industry. A lot of companies are in our space, from Microsoft with Power Apps, AWS with Honeycode. Some of you might have heard of companies such as Bubble.io or Retool. And generally, what I've found is that when I speak to software developers about low-code, there is a fair amount of confusion about what exactly low-code means. And that's probably because there is no O'Reilly textbook definition about low-code yet. Maybe that will change in the future. But what we wanted to do today is 2 things. We want to explain how we as Five view low-code. And secondly, we want to show you what it looks like to build an application inside a low-code development environment or inside of Five. So that's the purpose of today's talk. Now, before I start, we released Five just a few weeks ago, actually, sort of through our website as a free download. And we're currently running this hackathon. I don't think I need to explain what a hackathon is, but it'd be really cool if some of you wanted to participate. We're giving away some cash prizes as well as a iPhone 14 and a lucky draw. So you can sign up on five.co/hackathon. All you have to do is build a really fantastic app with Five, and then you get the chance to win these prizes. As I said, you can sign up on five.co/hackathon. You can download Five for free once you've signed up. You develop an application inside of Five, and last but not least, you submit your application back to us for the chance to win prizes. In fact, by joining today, you're probably getting a very good head start over all others, because you will hear from Pranoy, who is our product and developer advocate, and he'll give you a good idea of what's possible when you use Five and how you can use low-code to build applications. All right, so much about the hackathon. I just wanted to put that out there. And as I said, we'd be really happy if we had some sign-ups from Brisbane, and we're trying to sort of, get more engaged with the developer community in Brisbane. So we're also really happy to be here today. All right, now let's speak about low-code. I actually wanted to kick things off with this statement right here, which is from the co-founder and former CEO of GitHub. It's almost ironic that he said that the future of coding is no coding at all, because after all, he started a business which became successful and still is successful because we all store our code in GitHub, basically. And on top of that, he said this back in 2017, so more than 6 years ago. It's not a statement that was issued in relation to what has happened recently in the world of coding and software development through AI, for example. It's really a statement that's already 6 years old. And you might think that, all right, what you will hear from me now is a big story about how code is no longer relevant. But in fact, I want to do just the opposite. I want to present low code as a solution that combines higher level abstractions with full code inside one solution. Because we here at Five think that there is, and there always will be, a place for full code inside software development. So that's really important. And that's in fact how we view low-code application development. So with Five, we've been building a tool that helps software developers to rapidly build, test, and deploy online database applications. And again, you'll see what that means when Pranoy takes over. As I said, usually with software developers, I've discovered that some of them might have used some low-code tools before, but it's not, every tool is a little bit different and has a different purpose. Most software developers might have heard of low code, but are not really sure what it is. And even if I say sort of our one sentence pitch, because we are a startup and we need to have that, and I go, it helps you to rapidly build, test, and deploy online database applications, there's still a lot of open questions. So what I want to do today is break this down into pieces so that this becomes more understandable. And I'll do so using 2 questions. Question number 1 is, what is low-code software engineering? And I want to explain how low-code fits into the evolution of software engineering. And second question is, how do I develop applications in low-code? And as I said, hopefully giving you some good ideas of how low-code might be applicable in your own work, or how you could use low-code for the hackathon. All right, so let me start with question number 1. What is low-code software engineering? And I like to explain low-code like this. So low-code tools give you, or are tools that make it easier for you to develop and deploy applications. And when you're working inside a low-code tool, you use 2 types or 2 approaches to development. You use pre-built features that can be blended with high code or full code inside the same solution. You can almost think of low-code tools as something that is similar to an application development framework. Something like Ruby on Rails or Laravel, for example. What does a framework do? It gives you a structure and guidance on how you build your web application, right? That's why we use frameworks, full stack frameworks. And as I said, low-code tools are quite similar in that regard. They also give you a framework on how to build your next application. On top of that, the low-code tool is sort of your IDE. So that's where a low-code tool is a little bit different from a framework, because framework is just a framework, right? You use it in whatever code editor or whatever IDE you want to use. A low-code tool is a framework plus a purpose-built IDE. That's how I would explain it. And as I said, you have the option to build a lot of things using pre-built features as well as high code. Now, let me speak a bit more about these pre-built features right here. Because a lot of times when I spoke to software developers about low code, there's a bit of resistance. They always say that, pre-built features, what exactly do you mean? I want to make sure I can use code. But the reality is that when we look back at how software engineering has evolved over time, we've been using more and more abstractions, and we've been reusing more and more code over time. One statistic that I find is really interesting in this regard is this one right here. So on average, today's software developer writes 40% as much new and modified code as a developer did 40 years ago. How do we know that? This is a study that was conducted by QSM, which is a software estimation company. And they've been doing this for the past 4 decades. They've been analyzing completed software project data. And we can just see that, the reuse of code has been going up and up and up. And I'm sure all of you actually, when you think about your work and you think about frameworks that you might be using or libraries or packages or whatever it may be, you can probably relate to that, to the fact that we've been using more and more pre-built things in our software development. If you want to take this sort of one step further and you look at the role of code, it is not difficult to find big software organizations that almost issue warnings on the use of handwritten code. And one of my favorite statements in that regard is actually from this book right here, Software Engineering at Google, or the Flamingo book, as some people call it for obvious reasons. And when you read this book, I thought this is one of the most interesting parts in it. They go, code is a liability. And they say that it's important to remember and accept that code itself is a liability. It might be a necessary liability, but by itself, code is simply a maintenance task to someone somewhere down the line. They then go on to say writing entirely new code is frowned upon, that some of us have a saying, if you're writing it from scratch, you're doing it wrong. So try to reuse as much as you can. And probably there's no better organization to ask, how you treat code than Google, because they're managing a monolithic code base, which I think has more than 1 billion lines of code. So surely they would have a good idea of how you manage your code. Now, what's the most interesting part of this statement to me is actually this bit right here, where they say it might be a necessary liability. So yes, code is a liability, but you still need to write code to build software. That's the reality of software engineering. There is no better way for a human to tell a machine what to do than using code. And this brings me back to the slide that I was just showing you on my definition of low code. So low code means pre-built features the things that we just discussed, as well as high code. And in the context of 5, what does high code mean? Well, when you use 5, and that's something that you'll see, you can use TypeScript and JavaScript for writing functions. You can use HTML and CSS for customizing your user interface, your UI. You're building on top of a MySQL database that is fully provisioned for you on top of AWS. And every application is inside its own container. So we use Docker. We use Kubernetes for orchestrating these containers on top of AWS using the AWS container service. So that's sort of, as I said, that's, the definition of how I view low code, or how we see low code. And typically this sort of clashes with the idea that a lot of people have about low code, because they always think low code means eliminating code. Let me tell you, it's just the opposite. We're not trying to eliminate code. We're just trying to get rid of those elements of code where it's not necessary to write code anymore. But we don't want to take the joy out of writing code. So we still want to give you the ability to write code when necessary. What's the advantage of this type of approach? Well, really the same advantages that you would get from any higher level of abstraction. The abstractions, so the pre-built features, give you additional speed of development without losing control and flexibility over what you built, because you can still use a full code interface. And again, we'll show you what that looks like. It's quite theoretical what I'm presenting here, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about what low code exactly means. So a different way of looking at this, and this is again a question that has come up time and time again when I've been speaking to software developers about what we're doing here at 5, is, how exactly is this different from traditional development? Basically, what you're showing me here on the right, those are exactly the technologies that I would use in any web application development project. So how exactly is this different? What's the purpose of low code really? And I like to explain this using this chart right here. So typically in an application development project, we are, if it's sort of a business application development project in a bigger enterprise, for example, we're concerned about 3 things. First of all, we're concerned about development speed. So we want to build quickly, because typically our backlog has enough work for the next 6 months or 12 months. And we just want to make sure we can get these applications out quickly to our end users, because the business is waiting for it, and we're getting a lot of pressure to deliver our applications to them. At the same time, we want to be able to build complex applications, because there's a lot of scope creep. There's always a new feature that the end users come up. Yes, we might have defined our requirements at the start, and we've done some wireframes and mockups, but someone somewhere always comes up with a new feature. So we need to be able to deal with that complexity in our application development. Last but not least, we want to make sure that we're working inside an easy-to-use tool, because what happens a lot of times is that there's fluctuation in software development teams, and we don't want to build on top of something that becomes technical debt or that becomes a liability, as I've just shown you in terms of our code base. We want to be able to manage the code base for the long term, because maintenance is in fact a big part of application development. So when we look at this, these 3 targets of an application development project, where does low code, no code, and high code sit? And let's start with no code. Now, no code really optimizes for development speed and ease of use. No code solutions, and I would classify, for example, Bubble.io or AWS Honeycode or Google's AppSheet, or to classify all of those as no code solutions. They optimize for high speed of development. You can build an application really quickly, and anyone can do it. They're extremely easy to use. In fact, sometimes you're just building an application, you're just building an UI on top of a spreadsheet with them, which I'm not sure really classifies as application development, to be honest, because you're not even using a database, you're just using a Google Sheets as your database. So that's no code. Now, high code, probably not a big surprise, the approach that I assume most of you will be familiar with. That's really made for building very complex applications. But the downside is that typically development speed and ease of use kind of suffers. Still, high code is by far the best approach if you want to build something really, really complex. If you want to build the next Facebook, the next Twitter, the next, whatever highly scalable and consumer-facing application, by all means, go for a high code approach. Low code tries to bridge, these 2 approaches. So inside low code, we as 5, for example, we want to make sure that you can build really quickly. We want to make sure that you can use an interface that you're already familiar with by using the languages that you've learned in your web development. And because you can use full code in a low code development environment, we want to make sure you can build complex applications. That's how we look at it. Now, oftentimes I see, discussions on Twitter, on Quora, where software developers go, should I learn a no-code tool? What's the future of development? What will happen to my skills? Will no-code, low-code make my job redundant? And my answer has always been that if you're a software developer who knows how to write code, don't go towards no-code, because you're essentially downskilling yourself. You'll be working inside WYSIWYG, and what you see is what you get in drag and drop. If you're a software developer, make sure that your skills, your ability to write code still has value. And that's really where you want to go towards low-code tools, because those tools are designed for software developers. So to sum it all up, pretty long discussion on low-code, no-code. I hope everyone's still with me. But I really want to make sure that we get this distinction right, because I think it's really, really important to understand this industry. So to sum it all up, where's the difference between no-code and low-code? We see no-code tools as being designed to eliminate coding, so that application development becomes accessible to non-coders and citizen developers. That's typically the purpose of a no-code tool. And as I said, these tools heavily rely on what you see is what you get, and on drag and drop. We see low-code tools as a completely separate category from no-code. And this category is designed to speed up software engineering, to make application development faster and more productive for coders and software developers. And Five, so the company that we're trying to build, and the tool that we'll be showing you later, and where we hope to get some feedback from you guys, Five is really a low-code tool. So we're on this side of the equation. We want to build something that makes software developers more productive. Cool. So much on no-code, low-code. Now let me quickly speak about how do I develop applications in low-code. Best place to start is usually to think about how do we build applications today. And this is sort of a simplified chart that I've put together. I still quite like these sort of 4 layers of an application. I think it's a good framework to think about what is a software application. And typically an application has to be hosted somewhere, so you have your infrastructure, and you can choose between AWS, GCP, and Azure. You have your database layer. You can choose between different flavors of SQL or NoSQL databases. You have your business layer where you can write, whatever your favorite language might be. If you're going for a data science project, you might be using Python. If you're going for more traditional web development, you're using PHP or JavaScript. And last but not least, you have your UI layer where you might be relying on different libraries or frameworks such as React. Or if you want to make it easier for yourself, you're using a full stack framework such as Ruby on Rails or Laravel, for example. Last but not least, you obviously need a couple of different tools to build this application, and that's where your Visual Studio Code comes in. You might be pulling in different packages from NPM, and you're obviously using GitHub to merge your code and manage your code base. And that's sort of the typical application development project, I'd say. Now, how does this change inside Five? So the way that we look at application development is that Five sort of covers these 4 layers. So one really important point about Five is that the platform is about development and deployment. That's something you'll see. So when you build an application inside of Five, you're automatically deploying onto AWS in a single click. We've seen that a lot of software developers who have more of a back-end or front-end background, they typically struggle a little bit with deployment, because the AWS management console is really not the most user-friendly interface in the world, I'd say. And getting on top of all of these different AWS services can also be a bit tricky. So we manage the infrastructure for you. We give you a fully provisioned MySQL database. I'll speak about the business layer and the UI layer in a second. So let's use these 4 layers to go through Five actually step by step. And let's start from the top. Let's start about the UI layer. So what do you get when you hit deploy inside of Five and you build an application? So Five is designed to build responsive web applications, meaning they run inside any browser and on any device. We're currently focused on building sort of applications that look like this, which are business applications, where the UI is sort of a predefined UI. So that's something that we give you out of the box, and you don't have to worry about building your UI. The typical use case that we are focused on satisfying, for example, is building a database and putting a front end on that database. So building a full web application on top of a MySQL database. Very typical use case for us. In terms of how you can customize the front end, earlier I spoke about, trying to give you really high speed of development or rapid application development. as well as full control and flexibility inside one solution. So inside 5, we've designed it in such a way that when you want to customize your UI, you can either do so in point and click, just selecting different elements that are on your front end. You can just assign colors, change fonts, and all of that stuff. Or if you are a web developer who loves writing CSS and loves to adjust margins and borders and colors and fonts, you have a full-blown CSS editor where you can really adjust anything. So that's, as I said, the speedy approach of just point and click adjustment of your UI, and that's the sort of full code approach where you have full control and flexibility. Moving on to the business layer. So inside 5, we give software developers an interface to write code. This looks a lot like Visual Studio Code. It comes with syntax highlighting, for example, sort of the typical features, auto-completion that you'd find inside your IDE. Those are features that you find inside of 5. At the same time, we're also trying to add a little bit of AI. So we give you an AI assistant that can debug your code or interpret your code, sort of the same way the GitHub Copilot does. Now, so once you've written your JavaScript or TypeScript functions inside of 5, next question is, how can you actually use them in your application? That's where we rely on event-driven programming. So any kind of end-user event that happens, a button click, a on-exit event inside a form, server or client side, you can use these events and you can attach code to them, and the code will be executed when the event happens. You can also use jobs, such as time-based processes, to execute code. And this is what helps you to build sort of if this and that types of workflows inside of 5. Database layer. Now, I've mentioned the MySQL database a few times already. Our first client sort of, was saying we should use, or we should build something on top of MySQL. This became our default. And at the moment, we always build on MySQL. In fact, inside of 5, you can define your tables, you can build relationships. 5 manages your primary and foreign keys. Anything that you would typically do inside a MySQL GUI, such as MySQL Workbench, for example, you can pretty much do that inside of 5. And this is the visual database modeler that we give you, for example. Now, not surprisingly, because we're building on top of an SQL database, you can write SQL queries. You can also build them visually. Again, that's just an easy way, sort of the common way, right, to interact with your database. So again, that's something you can do inside of 5. Last but not least, infrastructure. I've already mentioned we deploy to AWS. So it's a one-click deployment feature that lets you deploy onto a managed infrastructure that we manage for you. And we also give you a development, testing, and production environment. So development is sort of your own sandbox, where when you build the application, you can just deploy to development, check out what you've built. Testing is your staging environment. So if you want to pass on the application to your UAT team, you can do that in the testing environment. And last but not least, you deploy to production, a separate environment where your end users access the application. This makes it a bit faster to build applications. So we're trying to have this iterative approach where these environments are separate from each other so that you can push out features really quickly while still continuing to build your application. Last but not least, maintenance. I've mentioned maintenance briefly at the start. A lot of times, application development really doesn't stop at the point of handover. There's always maintenance that needs to be done. Something doesn't work, something needs to be fixed. We give you a full audit trail inside of 5 where you can see all the changes that were made to your application. And we also give you end user logs as an inbuilt feature in 5. So the idea that we have for 5 is to become a sort of full stack development environment inside one solution that covers everything from developing your application all the way through to deployment. And as I said, this is what we've been working on for the past sort of 2.5, 3 years. It's still early days for us, to be honest. As I said, we only pushed this out into a general availability release earlier this year. And we're now we're a bit more aggressive on marketing than we were in the past, which is also why we join events like this, because we want to start speaking to developers and we want to get their opinion on what we've built. And with that, I will hand over to Pranoy, and he'll show you what 5 looks like. So over to you, Pranoy.
Thank you, Noam. I'll just quickly share my screen. Can you see my screen? Okay. Okay, so hi everyone. Let me just start off with quickly reintroducing myself. I am Pranoy, and I'm actually just a recent graduate from University of Queensland with my software engineering. So as what Dom mentioned is what we are doing here is we are building our very own low-code platform, and we call it Five. And what I want to do is I want to just give you a quick demo of Five so we can all understand what we mean by low-code. So, okay, when you first download and install Five into your system, this is the first screen that you're going to see. This is your first landing page when you see. Now, let's say that you are a developer who's using Five for the first time and you have been asked to create your very first app inside it. Now, the question arises is that how do I get started? How do I make my first application inside Five? Okay. So to get started, what you want to do is you want to open up Five and then you want to click on this applications tab over here. So once you click on applications, now if you want to make a first app, you want to click on this yellow button here, which is called as add item. Once you click on it, you can start off with naming your first application inside Five. So you can start off with calling it my first app. And then what you want to do is you want to save it. You can save your app by clicking on the save button here, which is indicated by a check mark. And once you save your application, you'll have access to this little blue button here called as manage. So let's click on it. So once you click on manage, now you're inside the development environment of Five. So basically you can access all of these menus. So basically we have a bunch of menus here from visual, logic, data, tasks, setup, and tools. And all of them will have a bunch of features such as visual will have forms, chart wizard, queries. Similarly, logic will have functions, code editor. Then we have data, tasks, setup, and tools. So you can use a bunch of these features to start making your own application inside Five. So what do we have here? Currently, I have an application called as my first app, and it's a completely empty application because we just made it in front of you. So let me quickly run you and show you what happens when you run a blank app inside Five. So in order to run my app, I'm just going to press on this little run button here. So let's start loading. From the spinner, you can say that Five has started. Yep. Okay, so my local application has been opened up. Now you can see that it's just a completely blank application. What we have we have a navigation bar on top and a sidebar on here, which is given to us by Five from default. But as for any features, our app is completely empty. Okay. Okay, so reiterating myself, let's say that you're a developer who wants to create your first app inside Five. So for the purpose of this demo, let's make a very simple use case. Let's say if you want to make a very simple customer form where you have a customer table and you want to populate that form populate that table using a form. So let's see how quickly we can achieve that inside Five. Okay, so let's get started building my table. How can I make my customer table inside Five? So in order to make my first table, we want to go to data, this menu called as data here, click on data, and now click on tables. After clicking on tables, what you want to do is you want to click on this lightning icon here called as new table wizard. And now you can start off with naming your table. So I can just call it my customer table. And then we can add 3 fields here by clicking on this plus icon. So let's just give it 3 fields. Yeah. First, they can be anything. My first field can be name. My second field can be email. My third can be city. So that we're collecting the name, email, and the city for each customer. Now, if I click on this lookup over here, you can see that I have access to all the basic data types which are provided me in SQL. So I can play around with my data types if I want to, but just to keep this demo very simple, I'll just keep everything as text for now. Let's give them some sizes just to be safe. And then click on save. And now within 30 seconds, you've actually already built your first table inside Five. Now, just let's say if you want to do this thing more visually, what you could do is you click on data, but except clicking on table, now you want to click on the database modeler. So if you click on the database modeler, now you can see your table way more visually. So if you want to make any changes over here, you can just hover to any field and just double click on that and you can make any changes here. You can also add your own tables inside it by clicking on this add table button. And now you can add your tables. It's that easy. Okay, so that's it for tables. Let's talk about how we actually make a form for this table. So in order to make a form, what you want to do is you want to click on visual, and inside visual, you want to click on forms. Yes, I'm going to discard my changes. Inside visual, you click on forms. And after you want to click on forms, you want to click on this lightning icon here again, similar. Then we're going to select my table. So I want to build a form for the customer table. And now, as you can see, the rest of my information is already filled in for me. Let's click on next. And rest of my information is already filled in for me. Again, I have my name, email, and city, which will be visible for me in my form. with these captions. So I can go ahead and save this. Now let's run my app and see what changes did that actually bring into my final application. So remember, we just built a table and we just built a form. So let's see what changes in that my application. Okay, so as you can see, we already have a menu item on the left, and we already have an interface on my screen through which I can actually populate my table. So if I click on this add item here, I actually get all of my fields. So I can start typing my name, Pranoy, my email, which is Pranoy@5.co. Sorry for the spelling mistake. I'll fix it later. And my display, which is, yep. And then go around and save it. Let's create one more record just for everyone's reference. I can just be very random here. Lorem, I can call it lorem@ipsum.com, and city can be Lorem Epsilon. Let's save it. And now you can see I have both of my records on my left side. So I can just go to and fro between any record. So basically it works like an actual proper form, and we build that within minutes. Okay, so few more changes inside my application. Let's say if I want to actually make this a multi-user application. So whenever I launch it, I actually get a login screen. And let's say if I want to also add a terms and conditions page, and I want to change the overall look of my application. So let's see how we can do that. So first thing is making it into a multi-user application. So that can be done by going back to my landing page. So that can be done by clicking on home. Let's click back on applications, click back on my app. But now, except clicking on the manage button, I want to click on the edit button. After clicking on the edit button, I get access to all the other options. I want to toggle the multi-user option. And after toggling the multi-user option, that's it. Your application is now a multi-user application. So whenever you open for the next time, you'll get a login screen. And the second thing was to actually add a terms and conditions screen. That can be done by going to that bottom field, which is called as license agreement, double clicking on that. And now you can just simply write your terms and conditions over here. I can just be like, please accept my conditions. And that's it. You can basically use all of these tools over here, or you can actually convert the entire thing into HTML or CSS and just write your basic HTML, CSS here if you want some fancy terms and conditions screen. Yep. For now, just keep it really simple. And then hit on save, save again. Let's go back into managing my application. And the last thing that we talked about was changing the overall look of my application. Now, Dom already talked about that 5 actually gives you a point and click theme editor. So you can access that by going to setup and then clicking on themes. After click on themes, you want to click make a new theme by clicking on add item. Name your theme. I can just call it my best theme. Yeah, that's it, my best theme. And then double click on click to edit theme. And now you have access to the point and click theme editor. Now, backend developers are going to love this because you don't have to mess around with any CSS in order to make changes into your application. So basically, let's say if you want to change the color of your navigation bar, so you just click on your navigation bar and just change the color, and that's it. The color has been changed. Let's say if you want to change the color, basically not the color. Let's say if you want to change the hover effect of this breadcrumb. So click on breadcrumb hover, just select different color, and now the hover effect has been changed. So that's it. But let's say that you are a web developer who actually likes doing CSS, or you are someone who wants that freedom. So what we have done is we have actually give you the entire CSS of the entire application. So you can basically just mess around anything over here. You can be as creative as you want. Actually, just to show you, I have this pre-written CSS over here. I'll just copy this and I'll paste this to show you that completely works. And you can actually see all of the changes over here. So as you can see, my theme is already a lot different. So let's click on save. Let's click on save again. The last step remaining is attaching this to my instance, attaching my theme to my instance. So let's go to instance. So basically what an instance is, every application can have any number of instances, and each instance can have its own name, its own theme, and its own logo. So all instances, basically, they look very different. So I go to my default instance and I can attach my theme. I basically quickly select a user interface. Let's click on save. Let's click on run. Now let's see what changes we have brought into my final application. As you can see already, my app looks a lot different. I have a login screen. My color scheme is very different. I can just start with quickly setting up the password for the admin account, and that can be done by pressing admin and admin over here. Click on sign in. I can just quickly set a password for the admin account. And I get my terms and conditions screen as well. We accept terms and conditions, click on continue, and bam, I'm inside my application. And see, it looks a lot different right now. My theming and my CSS basically works. Okay, so that's it for creating a brand new application. Let's say that, okay, that's for creating a brand new application. Let me paint you a little different picture. Yeah, let's say that you were a developer, that you are a developer who is working on basically was asked to work on an application which has already been developed using 5. Let's say, how do you do that? Okay, so everyone's further reference, basically what we're talking about here is that you're a developer who's been asked to work on this particular app, which is a property finder application. So let's say, let me actually show you the application. So let me log in as an admin inside the application. And let's sign in. Oh, so I'm sorry, my instance was temporarily down. I have to redeploy my application. So if I remove my application from deployment and I just go to my instance and I redeploy my application. Basically what AWS does is that if your app is hosted without any activity for a long amount of time, it just drops it from the server. And after my application is out, I can run it again. Yep. Okay, so now I'm back inside my login screen. So let's put an admin password, and now inside my final application. So basically, it's a very simple property finder application where you have customers and you have managers. Customers are able to send in simple booking request about a particular property. So let's say if you want to look at a particular property, they can send in booking requests for that property, and then managers can look at those particular data sets of this, of anything that connected. Okay. So let's say that you are a developer who's been asked to work on this particular form. So let me show you how this form works. So you select your property, you start typing in your name, and the form will expand. Then you can select a booking time, and then you can write your email, and then you can hit on submit. And then those basically that record will be sent to managers, and managers can look at data. So let's say your developer has been asked to work on this app, and you have been asked to actually connect this application to a third-party messaging service, so that whenever a customer hits on submit, we actually get a notification and inside whatever messaging service of my choice. And yeah, so let's see how we can do that. Okay, so what happens right now is whenever we hit on submit, we actually are calling a very simple JavaScript function. So let me show you. Okay, so if I go back into my development environment of 5, if I go to logic, and if I go to code editor, if I actually show you in a better way, in your screen right now, you see is a process. So I go back to 5. If I go to process, if I click on booking requests and I click on fields, this is my particular process. So if I put it on left-hand side, okay. So you can see I have my process in front of my screen. So I have all of my fields. My first field is which property would you like to visit? My second is my details. My third is my field to accept my customer name. Similarly for booking time, email address, for my email, and my marketing consent. Okay, so let's say if I want to connect this app to a third-party messaging service. So I already have a function here, which is being invoked into this particular event called as do-run. So let's click on view. And now as you can see, 5 has opened up a full code editor right inside my browser. So it's just simple JavaScript. It's a very simple function. We are basically calling a simple SQL statement over, which is inserting some values into a customer. And then we are getting the customer name, the property key, the email, and the booking time from the process. And then we are executing this SQL over here with sending the key, the name, the email, the property key, and the booking time as the arguments. And then we are checking the results. Okay. What I can also do is that something that's really fancy is that our code editor is actually already connected to OpenAI. So if I just highlight a particular section of code, what I can do is I can actually ask OpenAI to explain that code to check it for errors. So I actually just explain that code. I don't know how well of a job it's going to do because I've actually highlighted a simple section, but let's see. So I'll start processing it. And after a while, it actually said the code is checking the result database if it's not successful, etc., etc., etc. So basically, you can ask OpenAI to check for any errors or basically explain the code to me as well. It's pretty powerful. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to connect my application to any third-party service. So what I have here right now is actually a pre-written function called as send to Slack, which is getting the customer name, the visiting time, and setting a date. And what it does next is it sets a simple HTTP client, and it sets it contents where that's very simple, that customer has made a booking for this property, date of inspection is this, etc., etc., etc. Then what's happening in the end is that we are sending a simple post request to a webhook provided to us by Slack. So what we are doing here is that we are making a message and we are sending it to Slack. And this webhook is for this particular Slack channel. So let's see, we can just copy this function, go back to my original function, paste it here, and call this function. It should be that simple inside full code, right? So let's see if that works inside 5 or not. So let's save, let's hit on run. Let's log in as an administrator. Let's go to customers, booking request. And now let's quickly fill up my form. I can select my property, 1 Lysander Street, start typing my name, Pranoy, my city, Brisbane. My booking time for my property can be 9th of May, and my email, which is pranoy@5.co. And now let's put them on at side to side. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's expand this. Let's put this over here. So what should happen right now is when I hit on submit, I should get a notification over here. So let's click on submit. And bam, I already have a notification here that Pranoy made a booking for this. So you see, using code inside 5 is basically equivalent to using high code. So you have that much amount of freedom. So Slack was just an example, but of course you get it. You can send a post request to or get request to any other API of your choice. Okay, so since we are running out of time, I'll just quickly cover the last part, which is deployment. So of course, we're talking about building application. Let me just quickly talk about deployment. So now, as Dominic mentioned, that 5 actually allows deployment of applications inside it, and we deploy applications in an AWS environment. And we have also mentioned that every app gets 3 deployment environments, which are development, testing, and production. But if I try to access my deployment environments right now, what you'll see is that I only have access to my development environment. I do not have access to my with my testing and my production environment. That is because I'm currently logged in as a developer inside 5. And the access to those other environments is only available to an admin. And that is because developers shouldn't just have the privilege to push things into production. Those things should only be done by administrators. So let me quickly log in as an admin inside 5. Go back to my application. And now if I click on instance, now you'll see that I have actually, now you'll see that I actually have access to all of my from my development, testing, and production. And with just a single click, my application starts getting deployed into that cluster. And they're all completely individual from each other. Once you have deployed application in development, they can go to testing. And after they went to testing, they can go into production. And and that easy, my application is deployed. I can hit on run and my application starts running. And deployment is that easy inside 5. Okay. And we also have particular tools for maintaining the application inside 5. But since we're running out of time, I would just quickly like to pass it back to Dom. So I'll quickly share my screen. Over to you, Dom.
Cool. All right. Kevin said, as we're the only speakers tonight, don't feel pressured on time, please. All right. Okay. Maybe there's some questions from the audience. Let me just quickly present a few more slides, and then we're open for Q&A. Obviously, if there aren't any questions about what Pranoy just presented, we're more than happy to jump back into the development environment. But I actually wanted to come back to this statement, just wrap things up. So the future of coding is no coding at all. We always try to give a really quick impression of what 5 looks like, what it can do. And I think Pranoy gave you sort of a pretty good idea of, how we think about these sort of pre-built features that can be mixed with full code, and where we see full code has its place in application development. And as I said, we're sort of presenting a different vision for the future of software engineering. In fact, what you just saw there, where Pranoy was using JavaScript and TypeScript, 5 is set up in such a way that it supports WebAssembly. Now, for those who are not familiar with WebAssembly, it's not a programming language, even though a lot of people tend to think it is. It's a compilation target for existing programming languages, such as C# or C++ or Rust or Python, which traditionally cannot be used inside the browser. And where Pranoy was writing JavaScript or TypeScript functions, that's where in the future you'll be able to select which language you want to write your functions in. So that's where we want to take 5 going forward, so that more developers, regardless of their background, regardless of their favorite programming language, can actually use 5 to build applications. And that's pretty much all we wanted to show you. Thanks a lot for joining. We do hope you enjoyed the talk and the quick demo that Pranoy gave you. I'm always really happy to get questions or feedback, so you can email me. That's my email right up here. And let me say one more time that, if you would like to participate in a hackathon, our hackathon is happening right now. The deadline for the submission is 9th of June, so you still have a bit of time. And yeah, go onto 5.co/hackathon to register. Cool. And I think, that's it.
Right.
Thanks very much. Thank you. That's awesome. We'll just have a look at some of the questions coming through. I'm just ferrying over a couple from the YouTube side of things as well. Thank you for that question, Matt. I'm just going to pop that in. And 1 second. I don't think I can set a name, so I'm just going to put the name in the text. All good. All righty, we're good to go. I'll be able to now start ferrying over some questions. Yeah, no, it was good. There's a bunch of really interesting kind of thought-provoking ones. Some kind of came in, I think, before you started, explaining some of the nuances and some of the capabilities as well. So we might have already answered a couple of those as well. But that's all part of the fun. So yeah, we're folks, if you and obviously thank you very much obviously for presenting all of that. I think that was really well presented. We've been able to get a really good grasp of exactly what you can kind of put together, and I think it's exciting to especially to note that you're running this hackathon. It should be interesting to see where people have really pushed the boundaries of what the platform can deliver.
Exactly.
and probably demonstrate exactly where you can start to build out on to really improve that kind of platform. So yeah, it's going to be a really kind of exciting event that you can catch up on, and there's prizes there as well, and I know the BrisJS community loves a good prize. So we've had a few things like that. Let's get cracking into a couple of questions. So one of the early ones I think were really interesting as well. If I'm an existing NPM publisher of JS modules, how can I start to contribute these chunks as things that are usable features for low code environments? So you're an NPM contributor, right? So you want to get your packages out there as much as possible and have them as kind of maybe drop-in replacements. How do people start bringing that into environments like yours?
So currently how we handle NPM packages is, since it's in very early stage, we use Webpack to basically compile an entire NPM package to one single file. And then we use that as an external library inside 5. If I go back to 5, we have an option, and then we just use it. So currently we don't have just an ability, you can just do npm install and get a package. So we just recompile them into one single file. We put that inside a library and then we can use them. So basically,
great. Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, you're bringing it in. You're giving that access to people. They're not locked out of the NPM ecosystem.
No, they're not locked out.
So that I think is already a huge win for anything that is on top of the no code style where you've got pre-compiled chunks or things like that as well.
Absolutely. In fact, just the previous week, I wanted to just do some sort of an XML validation. And how, if I wanted to code it from scratch, so I just saw this library. That's when I just recompiled it just this previous week. And I just used that library inside it. So,
yeah, nice. Fantastic.
Maybe just quickly to add to that, because the question, I think, was not just about us, right? It's about different low-code platforms, and we're not the only one inside the market. I think a lot of times when you start evaluating low-code platforms, it's worth asking, do they use proprietary languages or not? Now, everything we've shown you today is sort of, we're using the standard boilerplate you could almost say boring technologies that anyone would build web applications on. I mean, MySQL has been around for decades, that's for sure. And there are other platforms out there that rely more on proprietary languages. And that's sort of as a startup in this industry, that's a choice you have to make. How you want to approach that question. Do you want to invent a new language? In fact, Microsoft Power Apps, for example, is relying on a new language, which is built on Excel. So it's more accessible for business users. There's some other platforms out there which also have reinvented languages or have invented their own languages. We are trying to use standard languages as much as we can inside of 5, and that's why we always like to show. Well, you haven't seen the SQL editor, in fact, but you get the idea. Obviously, when Pranoy was building the database, you've seen the code editor for JavaScript. So
yeah, great.
Yeah,
good to call out for that, especially. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm picking these up in the wrong order, but one of these here is we've jumped from the data, from NPM, from code, and then we're going to go and have a look at user experience. So how tied are user experiences to the low-code backend design? So I think this is trying to allude to if you want to change your UI, are you having to change your code like significantly? Like is refactoring or changing business logic or app flow going to mean that you have to shift things around, or does the platform support that well? Something like that.
So currently
they can correct me if I'm wrong.
So currently we are built in a way that it's very quite like data agnostic. So it's quite independent. So our backend structures and our front end UI, it's not really that limited. Basically, the UI can look like whatever we want it to look like, and the backend won't be affected at all. So yeah, it's not a structure that if you have some sort of a low-code platform, the UI has to look in a certain way. It can actually be pretty flexible. But of course, there are little challenges to that, and we are just trying to solve it. Let's see how we can do that. That's why we had this theme editor, and we just trying. And recently, we came up with this thing where we can just give the ability to change the user interface in a way, and we just keeping on adding more and more features just to give that UI extensibility as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there'd be different levels of what people want from their visual editors. Like you said, some folks just don't want to touch any of that stuff. They just maybe want to change a few colors. Other folks want complete control. So there's a huge sliding scale there of interest.
Yeah, in fact, there's one thing that that's actually. So what we can do inside this is in order to just people to have their own ways, that you can make your own React or like Angular components, and you can actually import them inside 5 as a plugin. So you can basically use your own components as well.
Yeah. And I think that calls out to not the next one, but actually, let's just go to that one because it's the relevance. So make sure we catch the right ones. This one here was, as a front-end developer, what's the interplay between low-code platforms and popular JavaScript frameworks like React, Angular, and Vue? Can we tweak? So there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the major things, because I can see that front-end developers may not really enjoy no-code and low-code platforms that much, especially low-code platforms that much, because of course, if you see a lot of low-code platforms, the UI, the changes with the front end, it's very, very limited. So that's why we really wanted, so that there is some tweaking with React and Angular possible, developers actually get their own environment to work at. So that's why we really wanted to, they are able to create their own components, and put that. That's why we are working on this feature with plugins, so they can actually use React and Angular components and just use it inside 5.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. So you set up kind of a React node, and then you kind of bring components in, or you have to pick what framework you have, or do you bring your framework in?
No, so basically you just open up React like you used to React or Angular. And then what you do is you basically import this little 5 widgets that we have, and you build on top of them. So it's not really restricted. It's just very little bit restrictive, but not that much. Of course, we're trying to overcome that restriction, so you can just be as creative as you want with the components. But yeah, so and then you take it out as a plugin. Basically, just import it out, and then basically, if you want to import it, that's a huge process in itself. But then we have ways how you can import it inside 5.
Yeah, so you're just adding a bit of glue code, basically glue components, and that way you can then start bringing everything in. I think that sounds pretty reasonable to me for like even any platform and even any framework. Yeah, the good thing is you don't have to write the glue, so that's kind of nice. So I think that definitely answers that question. I think one of that again is then tied with the one that I jumped over is how do low code platforms affect the ability to customize? Hang on, I got to read that. Customize and extend code in new or existing JavaScript based applications. I think we've kind of touched on that. So this is like you're able to go and define, like you said, plugins, right? You can go and also define, your own code in these different sections. So this is probably one of those early questions. It's probably more of a no code. I'm trying to work out what low code is kind of question. But rather than me trying to answer this, do you want to kind of answer it in your own?
No, I think that question gets answered in of course what you said, and of course sure, but I would just like to add one more thing, like what Dom said, that we are actually compiling everything into WebAssembly in the end. So that actually keeps us with the possibility of adding so many languages. We are actually trying our best to incorporate C# inside it, and then we're going to move on to Rust and Python. So yeah, so that's what we're doing. It's just very heavily focused with developers, as you can see. So if you're a citizen developer, if you're a person who doesn't know how to code, if you jump onto 5, you probably won't have much of an idea what you're doing. But if you're a developer and you've been through, let's say, this demo or a documentation, it's probably you'll be able to build apps there. It's basically designed for developers in a way.
Yeah, I think, and that is a perfect segue into the fact that the low code environments here. I think folks are interested in the difference between like this environment and like traditional debug, test, and deploy. So how's debugging look in that kind of platform? Like how are you going through that?
Oh, the debugging process.
Share your screen, Pranoy. I think that's
actually, I'll show you.
That was the part we skipped over because of time constraints.
Yeah,
we're happy to show it.
Yeah,
that's what they wanted. Got to give the people what they want. Debugging is important.
So, talking about debugging, let me just quickly log out as an administrator, which I was, logged back in as a developer. You can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, let's go back to my application. Okay, so I'll just talk about debugging and maintenance for a bit. To basically, in order to maintain your applications, you have this little tab called as tools. So you have like code analyzer, code search, form code, and audit trail. Actually, let me quickly cover audit trail. What audit trail does is, so you have these two sections called as from and to. So if you select the date, let's say if I select like from 1st April to 1st of May, and I hit enter. Oh, wait, so I'm sorry, this won't show me because it's a new instance. I'll go back to a older instance, which is this one. Here I have all my logs. Basically, this would actually help you understanding debugging a lot better because I have debugged so much with it. So let me go back to my, similarly, now inside this audit trail, let's say if I selected the previous 1st April and this day. So what we are getting is now 5 is basically showing all the single changes which has happened in my application from 1st April to 1st of May. So I can actually see every single change that has happened in my application with any developer. So you see some of the developer account made some change over here. Then I made some change over here. Then someone with the system admin privileges made some changes over here. So you can track every single thing. That's one of the ways. The second way can be actually, if I quickly go and deploy my application over here. The second way is that whenever I run my application, I also have an alternate way of running it, which is called as run with inspector. So what that does is, let me just quickly show you. Okay. Yeah, now I have an option called as run with inspector. If I just quickly. Now what that does is, it actually opens up our application in a debug menu, with the debug menu. So now, once I open up my application, I have something called as 5 inspector. Yeah. So what basically is now it's actually a built-in debugger inside 5. So let's say if I go to my customer booking process that I showed earlier, and I just quickly do some sort of a booking process and select a booking time. And when I hit on submit, now I showed you guys earlier that I have a function attached to this process, but if I hit on submit here, the debugger actually tells me that yes, you have actually invoked a function. once you have it on submit. So if I click on it, it'll actually show me what exactly that function is. Not only that, it'll also show me what are the function variables, what are the exactly execution log, which is happening inside that function. Let's say we are logging it twice, which is post request and something over here. Also, if you guys remember, we were calling an SQL query inside this function. So 5 will also tell me that yes, an SQL query has been called from a particular function, which I can see that this particular query was, and after query and what are the results of the query. Not only that, I can also see all of the variables in my application. And of course, every single log which have been happening. So it's a very, very powerful debugging tool that you can actually use to debug your entire application. So that's one of the ways how debugging works inside 5.
Yeah, nice. It brings part of that, like if you've hooked things up correctly, part of your local tool chain, like in IDEs and things, just to have that watch and that inspection seems like really good to be able to bring that in. So yeah, I guess in the context of the question, how does it differ? I think I guess it differs in terms of, you know, being an integrated tool set, right? Like it's integrated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Basically, it's different from how you actually debug in a your normal environment, because here it's more of a visual way of you can debug. You can actually see your things and everything. But yeah, it's very different from how you actually tackle normal.
Yeah, well, looks pretty cool. It's yeah, quite accessible. And this is I guess maybe again a left field question. We're jumping from different topics. So this one's interesting. 5 is tied to MySQL. Any ideas around JSON document storage style data sets? I think someone's interested in bringing in their existing document store. You know, if it's like maybe HStore or you know something like MongoDB or something. And you know, is there any kind of advice or approaches, or maybe go transform your data first?
Well, I haven't really explored that field much, so
I guess it's one of those classic, it's on the roadmap kind of responses, you know. As I said, we started off on MySQL, and in fact, when we started off, we had SQLite there, MySQL, and Postgres. Then we sort of had to choose one, because you know you have to support the SQL syntax inside of 5 to make sure it works. And we kicked things off with MySQL, just sort of a fairly, you know, can't go wrong with MySQL, I guess. But yeah, being able to connect to NoSQL databases, definitely something we'd like to see in the future. Just haven't had time to make it happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. I don't think I'm calling you out on like a missing feature, but I think like if somebody's got an existing data store, they'll have to realize that if you want to leverage that, they'll put it in a relational format or something.
Yeah, exactly. There might be ways actually to bring it in through code. Probably something, also we do come across that quite a bit, and there's usually different ways you can tackle that just inside your full code interfaces. But you wouldn't hook up 5 directly onto the database. That's something we'd like to see in the future for sure.
Yeah, cool.
You can do import SQL dumps inside it, but
yeah. Cool. I think this one's interesting too. I think we touched on it as well. How do low-code platforms help reduce the complexity of JavaScript development for non-developer stakeholders like BAs and product managers and folks like that? I think that is a question coming from someone in that field.
Yeah, Pranoy, do you want to show the drag and drop function builder?
Yeah, sure. I'll show.
Haven't used that feature in a while, but I think that's the best way to respond to it. So typically with BAs, right, you sort of have fairly tech-savvy BAs that might know a little bit. They understand JavaScript. They know what it's supposed to do. They can't really write it. Same for SQL typically. So actually 2 interfaces that we could show inside the product is the visual query builder, which is the same way that we build databases visually. You can build your queries. And then we sort of have a drag and drop locally type.
I'll just show them. I'll just quickly demo it if that's fine. If hide floating media control. So the first DOM mentioned is for SQL queries. So if I try to build my own query inside 5, I add a new query. So of course I get like a full MySQL workbench coded over here where I can just select star from customers, which is my customer table. I can hit on run and I get my results over here. So I can basically write any SQL query. But what I can also do is that I can I have this little visual tool where I can just add a table here. And let's say if I want to quickly build a query, which displays a name and an email, so I can double click both of them, hit on run, and I get a query. Let's say if I just want just do other things for like citizen developers, they have their modifiers here, they can add criterias here, they can add other statements over here as well. So it's not only that, let's say that you made some changes over here. So if you click back on SQL, so every changes that you do inside a designer will be converted into SQL. So you can, it's actually a two-way relationship. If you make any changes over here, they can be converted into the visual drag and drop manner, or if you want to make any changes over here, they can be converted back into SQL. So it's based on preference. Let's say that you have sort of a citizen developer who's working on here, who doesn't have idea of, who wants to work things in more visual drag and drop manner, they can use this. And let's say if a developer then jumps in, they can just convert everything back into SQL. That's completely the choice. That's one way. I think the other feature for any person who's not actually familiar with JavaScript was, I would recommend them to use something called as low code here. So you just convert your function to low code. And now what you get is you can now actually build your functions with a drag and drop, like building blocks. So you can basically just attach here, you can create text with, and you can just build your logics here, and you can make your own functions here. What you can also do is, again, you can, let's say if a developer jumps in, you can, with the press of a button, convert the entire thing into JavaScript. So yeah, so those are the two methods how we basically tackle people who are not kind of familiar with coding, who still want to develop. So yeah, so we have these drag and drop things for them, and they just to accustom to developers, they can always be, everything can always be converted back into it. Code.
Yeah. And so I guess, I think if they're like coming from a BA environment, or they want to analyze a particular business flow inside of an already developed app, if there's any visualization kind of tools like that, that'd be where they start looking, that'd be where they kind of pick that up.
Exactly.
I think there's a quick question here. Can we bring in existing authentication through Auth0?
Oh, yes, you can.
Done. I'm going to jump to Matt. Matt Russell asked the question, what advantages does 5 provide over something like compared to competitors like AWS Amplify? I think that's the question there.
AWS.
Right, so Amplify. I think Amplify is sort of the, if I understand it correctly, it's your Figma to JavaScript tool, which is more front-end heavy. For us, I think when you look at 5, we are coming more from a sort of back-end database-driven approach. So slightly different philosophy in terms of how we approach application development. And yeah, as I said, for me, the way I looked at the AWS tools is that they're more front-end driven than we are at the moment. So yeah, just basically approaching application development from 2 different sides.
Yeah, definitely. What I'm seeing from Amplify, it's really about front-end conversions and rapid front-end development. But
I haven't used it myself, but I've been trying to understand what AWS does in this space. And sort of that Figma to application, kind of vision that has been out there. I think that's what they wanted to do. I always wonder, because Figma, I think, was acquired by, was it Adobe lately? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm actually curious to see where they're going to take it in the future, if that's still an avenue that will happen under the Adobe ownership. But they're very much driven by we're more coming in from an angle to say, how can a backend developer, build a full stack application very quickly? And I reckon they come more from the angle of, how can a front end developer build a full stack application very quickly? That's in a nutshell, I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. I probably should have led with this one first, because this one sounded more like what we were seeing with the SQL console and everything, and some of the measures in place. It says what kind of measures are in place to avoid things like SQL injection on forms and brute force attacks. Is this something devs can implement themselves? If not,
okay. Dom, would let take that one, because we had talked about SQL injection.
Yeah, now I must admit, we should probably have brought our CTO to respond to that question. I know we don't trust anything that gets inputted into the front end, basically. So it's technically not, I think it's not possible actually to do SQL injection inside 5 if you try. For that reason, that we don't trust anything that happens in the front end. I said, if someone wanted to have a more technical answer to that, drop me an email and I'll hook them up with our CTO and you'll get all of the details how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, going through and just sanitizing all your inputs and making sure that you can't create an input that doesn't run through some sort of sanitization first. I think is probably where you were covered.
Absolutely.
Cool. So there's only two more. I promise. I'm not going to keep you here forever.
Absolutely fine.
But yeah. So are there any restrictions on the amount of API calls or the kinds of API interactions on of apps on 5?
Not really. There's no, as such, I'm aware of, there's no such API restrictions. If there is a public API, you can pretty much do a get or a post request as long as you're supplying what kind of a header and the content are. So yeah, I think it's not much of a restrictions there.
Okay.
Yeah, I've pretty much tried it on with Google Maps. I've tried it on with like Slack, Missive. I even tried on with just using Hibiscus, which was a basic PDF generation API. So it worked in all of them.
Cool. All right. And you know that we were going to ask this one. What kind of costs are involved for running apps over time?
Yeah, good question. Now, the way this works is that, so first of all, you can download for free, you can build locally. So, we as a company thought about when is it the right time to charge a developer? And we think that time is only when you've built something production worthy. So the way we think about it is, build locally, kick the tires on 5, see if it can satisfy your use case or not. If yes, come back to us and sign up for a subscription, and then you can host the application on the cloud. Now, the way we run things at the moment, you can actually find the pricing on our website, is there's a subscription fee monthly for each developer. So we charge by developer seat, which also makes us a bit different from other players in the industry, which charge by end user. So instead, we charge by developer seat. And then we actually pass on the cloud consumption that your application and your use of 5 causes to you. Now, it sounds complicated, but the reason is that we're not selling an off-the-shelf SaaS application, right? You could actually build something inside 5 that causes, I don't know, you need a T3 extra large on AWS, and you need to have AWS RDS for MySQL. You need a super, complex infrastructure. We could make that happen for you, but since we're from AWS, we're just passing that on to you because you're in charge of how you want to define your infrastructure. So that's the idea. It's sort of a pay-per-use model, you could say, where we pass on the cost for you. And if someone wanted to have some indications, again, there's some pricing on the website, or more than happy to have a conversation, but it very much depends on the infrastructure that you choose. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. I think usage-based is exactly. Definitely is not unexpected. So yeah, I think that hopefully helps out everyone as well. And you got there. You got through the barrage of questions. I didn't see any come in while I was just getting one answered, and there was one or two that jumped in at the end there. So I appreciate you spending the extra time with us and kind of taking us through some of the Q&A. No, that was wonderful. Thanks so much. Pass on the clap from the audience. Thank you very much again. Look, it's been really interesting to kind of run through it all and kind of get a look at some of the developing platforms and lovely support for native JavaScript, which we obviously appreciate at BrisJS.
Exactly right. Well, thank you so much for having us tonight, Kevin. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed the questions, by the way. I think excellent questions from everyone. And we're headquartered in Brisbane. If someone wants to have a chat sort of offline, shoot us an email. More than happy to catch up and speak more about low code and how it relates to JavaScript and all of those things. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. Exciting and great to see more JS being built up here and encouraging everyone to write more JS. So thanks for that as well.
Yes.
All right.
No worries. And hopefully we'll see you back again. We can analyze, I think maybe the top winners of the hackathon or something like that. We can see what.
Yeah, exactly
what
right.
Of course.
So yeah, join the hackathon. I think those were my last words for the night.
What's that again? I think I didn't hear it.
Join the hackathon.
All good, all good.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, folks.
No, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. All right.
All good. See you later.
Bye.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly share a couple of just the closing slides so you know how to contact us, and there we go. Hopefully you can see that, and that's working out fine. Awesome. Thanks very much. You've been a great audience. Thanks for the questions. I always appreciate those. It definitely makes the night more fun, and our speakers really definitely seem to enjoy it. So yeah, I really hope that you can join us for next month's BrisJS. We really will need your questions. We're desperately needing to build up, some different talk submissions. I know we have a couple of hey, would this be good kind of questions coming in over the last few weeks. So I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to get an announcement out, hopefully incrementally this time rather than as last second as it's been the last few times. It's tough to keep up, especially with things like public holidays getting in the way of announcements and in the way of BrisJS time. So I do appreciate everyone's patience with that as well. If you're ever interested, or you don't know what's happening and you're really keen to start, connecting with some more of the meetup, hit me up on all the different platforms as well. BrisJS, Twitter, for example, open to direct messages as well. If you've got any questions or you're not sure that you have everything set up for a talk, remember, they don't have to be big 40-minute, hour kind of things. We actually prefer lots of shorter talks, 20 minutes, 10-minute, 5-minute talks. If you've just found something cool and you're really interested to kind of show it to the community, or you've made something quick, or you've learned something interesting, and you want to pass that kind of knowledge on, they're great. They're awesome to be able to chuck in and get your feet wet in kind of the ocean of presenting to development communities and hopefully the Brisbane community as a whole. So yeah, don't be scared. We're all very friendly, and we're here to support you and let you use this as a platform. So yeah, again, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Take care.